night, only on CBS. All right, we're following some breaking news out of the Supreme Court. They have ruled that states can now force online shoppers to pay sales tax.
Yep, the 5-4 ruling is seen as a win for states who claimed they were losing out on billions of dollars every year under an old ruling that impacted online sales tax collection. And so we have Ilya Shapiro on the line now to kind of walk us through what this all means. I suppose, because I'm an avid online shopper, Ilya, I'm going to be paying a little extra on my next purchase?
It depends. It depends which company. Amazon has already been complying with state tax laws, and the big players already do. So this affects, Wayfair is the named plaintiff in this case, and they are the largest one in the country that does not pay sales tax in places where they're not located. So it really depends, and it'll take a while for different companies in different states to adjust their tax regimes. It'll shake out over a while. I think software companies that are designing tax software for compliance with all the different states are going to have a spike in business now as they work all of this out. So for a consumer, it really depends where you live, what companies you buy from, and how the laws in the different states are going to be applied. So a lot of uncertainty, and that's one reason why I'm not so happy with how this came out.
Yeah, when I was reading a little bit more about it, it seemed like the Supreme Court left some wiggle room for perhaps other laws, maybe federal laws, and I know Congress has been grappling with how to handle this issue of sales tax across the country.
Well, I don't know what Congress can do exactly, because we're not dealing with federal taxes. We're dealing with state taxes and how they apply. The ruling today was about a South Dakota law, which has a threshold. It's not just if you're a little old granny selling something over eBay, you have to charge the tax. There's a threshold of $100,000 of annual revenue or 200 transactions. So I guess a lot of companies will stop at 199 transactions or something. But regardless, other states aren't limited to that, and the Supreme Court didn't set out any sort of bright-line rule about what that means. Some states may say, there's no threshold at all. If you sell in our state, you have to charge it. Others might do something different. So, like I said, a lot of instability in the law might be a boon for tax lawyers and, as I said, software companies, but confusion and instability for consumers and internet companies.
And so, Ilya, what was Wayfair's argument? I mean, why were they saying that they should not be charging customers with taxes, whereas, for example, Amazon and others who sell online have to?
Well, Amazon has a physical presence in many, if not most, states, and to reach the decision that the court had to that it reached today, it had to overturn an old precedent, a 20-year-old precedent called Quill, that imposed a physical presence requirement. That is, to charge, to apply your sales tax to a company, they have to have some sort of, not necessarily their headquarters, but a warehouse or offices or telephone centers, something like that, that they're actually physically in the state and therefore availing of the state's services, police, fire protection, whatever else. So the court overruled that precedent, which was set before the internet age, before the real explosion in e-commerce, and said that that's no longer the case, and so that's why these companies now have to adapt. And as I said, it's unclear how this is all going to work.
All right, there's another ruling from the Supreme Court, Ilya, that involves the Securities and Exchange Commission. It sort of clears the way for the SEC to select its in-house judges to sort of enforce investor protection laws. They've said that that's unconstitutional.
Right. This could be even more significant than the tax case, which presumably in a few years will get worked out somehow. But this case is important for the accountability of what are called administrative law judges. So obviously we have a big bureaucracy in Washington. This case involved the Securities and Exchange Commission, regulation of financial investigations and securities and things like that. But lots of agencies have these internal judges that evaluate cases, prosecutions of regulatory violations and other things. And the court said said that to ensure accountability and maintain constitutional structure, these judges have to be appointed by officers that are in turn appointed by the president. So they can't be simply kind of bureaucratic clerks that are appointed by the staff or somehow just originate, because they have significant discretionary authority. They are significant officers that are continually serve for a long time. They're not simply just someone who happens to be pushing papers here or there, and that means, in technical terms, that they're in constitutional terms, they're an officer of the United States and subject to the normal separation of powers rules. This means that how the SEC operates, and potentially other agencies, although the court didn't talk about other agencies, will now have a closer tie to the executive branch. And this means that this case in particular, a trader named Ray Lucia, but it affects lots of other cases and will going forward, will now have to change how their prosecutions are being evaluated by these agencies. It's really significant in terms of how the SEC and others go about their investigations and prosecute wrongdoing.
Hey, Ilya, we want to keep talking to you about the outcome of some of these cases, but CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford has just left the Supreme Court, just left the courtroom. She's outside. And so I want to pivot back to this Wayfair decision because it seems like out of all the cases, this will probably affect the vast majority of us.
Well, I mean, sure, and obviously most of the states, some 41 states and the District of Columbia, had urged the court to kind of take this path today because they said they were missing out on tens of billions of dollars of revenue every year because so much has changed. I mean, the consumer landscape has changed since the Supreme Court first decided some of these cases involving whether or not states could collect sales tax. Of course, I know Ilya's probably already explained this, but back in the old days when people still ordered things out of catalogs, the Supreme Court had said that if you did not have a physical presence in that state, then the states couldn't get sales tax from you. They could not collect sales tax from you. And the reasons were, under constitutional jurisprudence, states really can't interfere with interstate commerce. They can't just start collecting taxes willy-nilly against people who, aren't in their state. But the opinion today really sets out that the Internet revolution has changed everything, and that these retailers, for all accounts and purposes, actually do have a real and meaningful presence in the states, and so therefore the states are free to require them to collect sales tax from people who buy things from them. This will have an enormous impact on some of these online retailers like Wayfair, which is obviously the name of the case, Overstocks.com, people who sell these goods and services, deliver them to you, and you don't pay sales tax on them. Obviously, small businesses said that was really hurting them because they still had to collect sales tax. It wasn't fair, and the justice today in a 5-4 decision agreed. So I agree this is going to be a huge consumer issue, a huge issue for consumers.
And Jan, what about this overturning of this SEC ruling here that applies to administrative law judges?
As Ilya pointed out, that's obviously going to have a huge impact kind of on the structure. It'll take a while kind of to see how that one's going to shake down. I agree with what he was saying and what I heard when I was kind of coming down and got mic'd up from coming down the steps. But the short-term immediate impact, though, I think for today is going to be this online sales tax. You're going to start seeing that that's going to affect people's lives pretty quickly.
So in terms of the court, what are we looking forward to? What's going to be next up on the docket?
Well, we're kind of getting into crunch time now, as Ilya knows, and we're going to be standing out here tomorrow, opinions we expect tomorrow, and then next week as the justices wrap up the term. Ilya and I will be actually out here waiting to see if they're going to hand down some of these major decisions that we've been waiting on. Of course, the biggest one that's outstanding is the president's travel ban, whether or not you could kind of ban travelers from 5 predominantly Muslim countries, plus Venezuela and North Korea. That's been in effect since December. The justices have signaled that they're probably going to allow it. It's the president's third try at a travel ban, so maybe the third time will be the charm for him up at the Supreme Court. But there are a couple of other cases that will have a big impact on people's lives, like cell phones and whether or not the police can kind of track your locations through your cell phone towers if they don't have a warrant. That's a big one. And Ilya, I know you've been following a lot of these too. If you want to jump in here, I don't want to hog the mic up here. I can't really see.
Yeah, Janice is also a big one about charging non-members of unions in the public sector agency fees. If the court rules, as it's expected to overturn another, this time 40-year-old precedent, this seems to be a theme, then it'll be a significant First Amendment doctrinal move, but also it would cut the funding going to public sector unions, particularly in states like California, Illinois, New York, that have been a significant part of the Democratic Party's electioneering.
So, Ilya, I mean, we've asked Jan that. What are you going to be, the same question, what are you going to be looking for from SCOTUS going forward?
Yeah, well, the travel ban in Janus and Carpenter, which Jan mentioned, the digital location tracking. And another one is NIFLA, a California case about compelled speech or disclosures in pregnancy counseling clinics that do not offer abortions in California is requiring them to talk about abortion availability. Another important free speech case. But even more than the bottom line result in all these cases, I'm really looking at the alignment. How successful will John Roberts be in his project of trying to reduce the number of 5 to 4 decisions? Clearly, he had moderate success today. He was actually dissenting in an unusual alignment in the sales tax case. And also, what more we learn about Neil Gorsuch in either his writings or who he joins in these various cases, as we're still learning about the newest justice. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, will Justice Kennedy retire? That would kind of throw everything into chaos, and the coverage of the cases will suddenly be secondary with the looming battle over the summer of a potential replacement.
Oh boy, yeah. You left us with a biggie, Ilya.
Ilya Shapiro and Jan Crawford, thank you both very much for your insights and analysis. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.